Elias heard the second horse before he saw it. He turned. A rider emerged from behind the barn. The moonlight caught the coat. Clara gasped. "That's Thomas's." The rider raised his rifle. Elias shoved Clara down. The shot struck the porch railing. Elias fired once. The rider wheeled his horse and disappeared into the darkness. Clara crawled toward the barn. "Wait." But she was already moving. Elias followed. Inside the barn, they found a saddlebag. It contained Thomas Whitmore's wedding ring, his pocket watch, and a blood-stained handkerchief. Clara sank against the wall. He was here. Elias crouched beside her. "Maybe." She looked at him. "No." Her voice was steady. "He was here." She held the pocket watch. "The back is scratched." Elias examined it. 3 letters had been carved into the metal. B. CV. He recognized them. Boone Creek Valley, the same land his father had once fought to protect. The ledger suddenly made sense. Elias opened it. Every page contained names of families who had lost their ranches. Beside each name was a payment. At the bottom of the final page was a list of judges, sheriffs, bankers, and land agents, and one name appeared over and over: Nathaniel Vale. Judge Vale had built his fortune by taking land from desperate families. But there was more. A second column showed payments from Elias's own father. Clara looked at him. "Your father was involved?" Elias stared at the ledger. "I don't know." The next page answered him. His father had originally joined Vale. Then he discovered the scheme was forcing families off land that contained valuable water rights. He tried to withdraw. Vale threatened him. Samuel had continued the fight, and Elias's father had hidden the evidence inside the Boone ranch. Then Samuel found it and died. Elias closed the book. For 11 years he had believed his family had been destroyed by bad luck. Now he understood. They had been destroyed by greed, and someone had spent 11 years making sure nobody knew. A gunshot came from the house. Elias ran. Clara followed. The front door stood open. Inside, a man was searching the study. He turned. It was Thomas Whitmore. Clara froze. "Thomas?" The man stared at her. He looked exhausted. His face was bruised. One arm hung uselessly at his side, but he was alive. Clara ran to him. Thomas caught her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he whispered, "I knew you'd come." Elias lowered his rifle. "You've got explaining to do." Thomas nodded. "I was captured by Vale's men." "Then why did the sheriff tell us you were dead?" "Because he wanted Clara frightened enough to surrender the key." Clara stepped back. "You used me?" "No." Thomas shook his head. "I tried to get you away from them." "Then why send me to Elias?" "Because Samuel told me he was the only man Vale couldn't buy." Elias looked at him. "Where is Vale?" "Coming here." Elias's eyes narrowed. "How long?" Thomas looked toward the window. "Before dawn." That gave them less than 3 hours. They moved quickly. Elias gathered the ledger. Thomas explained that Vale intended to seize Boone Creek Valley through a new territorial land ruling. If Elias could be forced off his ranch, Vale would control the water rights. But the ledger was proof of fraud. They needed to get it to the federal marshal before Vale arrived. There was one road north. Vale's men would be watching it, so Clara proposed another way. The old church road. Elias looked at her. "You know it?" "My father used it when I was a girl. You can ride?" She almost smiled. "I was raised on a ranch." For the first time, Elias saw her not as a frightened widow, but as a woman who had been surviving long before he met her. They left before midnight. Elias, Clara, and Thomas rode through the ravine. Behind them, riders appeared on the ridge. Vale had arrived early. They pushed harder. At the river crossing, Thomas's horse stumbled. A bullet struck the water beside Elias. "They're here!" Elias turned. 6 riders appeared on the ridge. At their center rode Judge Nathaniel Vale. He was an older man with silver hair and a black coat. He looked almost respectable. That was what made him dangerous. "Boone!" he called. Elias stopped. Vale raised his voice. "Give me the ledger and this ends." Elias laughed bitterly. "You've been ending things for 11 years. Vale's expression hardened. "Your brother was foolish. He was honest. He was inconvenient." Clara stepped forward. "You killed my husband." Vale looked at her. "Your husband was going to ruin everything." Thomas raised his rifle. Vale smiled. "Not everything, Mr. Whitmore." Then he pointed toward Clara. "She is the only reason you're still alive." Thomas went pale. Elias understood. Vale didn't want the ledger. He wanted the key. The ledger was only part of the evidence. The brass key opened another vault. A vault somewhere in Boone Creek Valley. Elias remembered his father's words. The water rights, the old mill, the abandoned silver mine. Then he knew. The ledger was not the final proof. The original land deeds were hidden in the old water mill. Elias looked at Clara. She understood immediately. "Go," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, you're the only one who can get there." She pointed toward the river. "I'll take Thomas." The decision took 1 second. Elias rode north. Vale's men followed. Clara and Thomas disappeared into the trees. Elias reached the old mill first. Inside, beneath the broken floorboards, he found a steel box. The brass key opened it. Inside were original deeds bearing the signatures of every family Vale had cheated. There was also a confession, signed by Nathaniel Vale. Elias had barely finished reading when Vale entered. "You always were your brother's shadow." Elias turned. "Not anymore." Vale raised his gun, but before he could fire, another voice came from behind him. "Drop it!" Sheriff Colton stood in the doorway. Elias stared. The sheriff looked exhausted. "I've spent 20 years doing Vale's work," Colton said. He threw his badge onto the floor. "I'm done." Vale laughed. "You think one guilty conscience changes anything?" Colton shook his head. "No." He looked toward Elias. "Proof changes everything." Outside, riders approached. The federal marshal had arrived. The confession, ledger, and original deeds were enough. Nathaniel Vale was arrested before sunrise. Sheriff Colton surrendered. The men who had worked for Vale were taken into custody. And for the first time in 11 years, the truth about Samuel Boone's death was written into the official record. It had not been an accident. It had been murder. Elias stood beside Samuel's grave that evening. Clara joined him. "You should have known," she said softly. "Known what?" "Your brother was never trying to save the land." Elias looked at her. "He was trying to save the people." She nodded. "That's what Thomas told me." Elias looked at the grave. "I wish I'd listened to him." Clara stepped closer. "You listened now." He looked at her. There was no grand declaration, no sudden promise, only 2 people standing beneath the evening sky after surviving something that should have broken them. Elias reached into his coat. He pulled out the small brass key. Clara smiled. "You kept it." "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her. "Because it brought you here." She lowered her eyes. "And now?" Now I don't need it anymore. He placed the key in her hand. Clara closed her fingers around it. What will you do? Rebuild. The ranch? Some of it. He looked toward the valley. And maybe something else. She waited. Elias finally said, "My brother spent his last years trying to make this place honest again." He looked at her. "I think I'd like someone beside me who understands why." Clara smiled. "I think I know someone." The following spring, Boone Creek Valley changed. The stolen ranches were returned where possible. The old water rights were restored. The abandoned mill became a working grain mill again, and the Boone Ranch became something Elias had never imagined. A place where travelers could stop without fear, where widows could find work, where a man who had lost everything could start again. Thomas recovered slowly. He and Clara remained on the ranch while he rebuilt his surveying business. As for Elias, he stopped avoiding the house. He opened the windows. He repaired the porch, and one warm evening, Clara found him standing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "You know," she said, "when I first arrived here, I thought you were the most difficult man in Texas." Elias handed her a cup. "Only Texas?" She laughed. "Don't push your luck." He smiled. The sunset stretched across the prairie. For years, Elias Boone had believed his family's story ended with a grave. He had been wrong. Sometimes the truth takes years to find its way home. Sometimes justice arrives late, and sometimes the person who walks into your life carrying trouble is the very person who helps you discover that your heart was never as empty as you believed. The wedding dress was eventually placed in a cedar chest. The blood was washed from the lace, the torn sleeve was repaired, but Clara never replaced the missing pearl button. She kept that space empty as a reminder. Some things are lost, some things are found, and some things, if they are meant to remain, survive even the darkest years. If you were standing in Elias's place, would you have trusted Clara when she first stepped off that train? Tell me what you would have done, and let me know where you're watching from. If you enjoy heartfelt stories of the Old West, courage, justice, and second chances, subscribe and join us for the next one. The woman was standing alone on the train platform when the last passenger train pulled away. Elias Boone noticed her because she did not cry. Most women left stranded in a frontier town with one suitcase. A torn traveling coat and nowhere to go would have been frightened. This woman looked furious. The late afternoon wind whipped dust across the empty platform. She stood beneath the station awning with one hand gripping a worn leather case and the other pressed against a small envelope. Elias reined in his horse. He had come into Mercy Creek for feed and lamp oil. He had not come looking for trouble, yet trouble seemed to have a way of finding him. The woman saw him. "Are you Elias Boone?" He stopped. "Who wants to know?" "My name is Clara Whitmore." She held up the envelope. "Your name is written on this." Elias did not move. "Who gave it to you?" "My husband." Elias frowned. "You have a husband?" "Not anymore." The words landed harder than they should have. Clara looked toward the disappearing train. "He was supposed to meet me here." "Where is he?" "I don't know." Elias dismounted. "Then why did you come?" She looked directly at him. "Because he told me that if he didn't arrive before sunset, I was to find you." Elias stared at her. "Did he tell you why?" Clara shook her head. "He only said one thing." "What?" Her fingers tightened around the envelope. "Don't let Elias Boone take me to the ranch." Elias went completely still. Clara watched his face. "That's why I'm asking you," she said. "Who are you?" The wind swept between them. Elias looked at the envelope. His own name was written across it in handwriting he hadn't seen in 11 years. His brother's handwriting. Samuel Boone. Samuel had been dead for 11 years. Elias took the envelope. His thumb trembled against the paper. Inside was a single sheet. Elias, if Clara comes to you, believe her. Don't take her home. Someone there is waiting for her. Elias read it twice, then a third time. Clara whispered, "Now will you tell me what this means?" Elias folded the letter. "No." Her eyes narrowed. "No, not here." He looked toward the road. "We have 10 minutes before the evening stage leaves. And if whoever your husband feared is watching this station, I don't intend to give them another chance." Clara hesitated. Then Elias extended his hand. "Come with me." She stared at his hand. "You just told me not to trust you." "I told you your husband wrote that." "Which makes it worse." For the first time, Elias almost smiled. "You're going to fit in just fine." He led her toward the livery stable. Neither of them noticed. The man standing across the street, he wore a gray coat and held a newspaper in front of his face, but his eyes never left Clara. By sunset, Elias and Clara were riding north. His ranch was 40 miles from Mercy Creek. Clara sat behind him on the spare saddle horse. She had said almost nothing. Finally, she asked, "How did your brother die?" "Shot." "Who killed him?" "We never found out." "Was he married?" "No." "Then why would he know my name?" Elias didn't answer. The truth was, Samuel had spent the last year of his life investigating something Elias had never understood. He had become convinced that someone was stealing land from widows and small ranchers through forged debt papers. Samuel had called it a quiet war. Then he disappeared. 3 days later, his body was found beside a dry creek. The sheriff called it robbery. Elias never believed it, but he had no proof. Until now. They reached the Boone Ranch after dark. The house sat beneath a ridge of black mesquite, its windows glowing warmly against the cold. Clara looked at it. "It is beautiful." Elias didn't respond. She noticed. "You don't like it." "I like the land." "And the house?" He looked toward the upstairs windows. "The house remembers too much." Inside, Clara was introduced to Mrs. Hattie, Elias's longtime housekeeper. The older woman looked surprised to see a stranger. Then she looked at Elias. He shook his head, slightly. "Don't ask." Hattie understood. Clara was shown to a bedroom, but before she closed the door, she noticed something on the wall. A portrait. 2 young brothers stood beside their father. One was Elias. The other was Samuel. Clara stepped closer. "That's him." Elias turned. "You knew Samuel?" "No." She touched the portrait. "Not him." She pointed to their father. "That man." Elias's expression changed. "Why?" "Because my husband had a photograph of him." Elias walked closer. "Where?" "In our house." "Why?" "I don't know." Clara opened her suitcase. She pulled out a small photograph. Elias took it. It showed his father standing beside a group of men. One face had been scratched away, but Elias recognized the others. They were the founders of the Mercy Creek Land Company, his father's old business partners, men who had died years ago. Except one Judge Nathaniel Vale. Elias's stomach tightened. Vale was still alive and still powerful. Clara watched him. "Does that mean something?" "It means you should have burned this photograph before you left." "Why?" "Because the man who took it may kill you for carrying it." Silence filled the room. Then a horse screamed outside. Elias grabbed his rifle. He stepped toward the window. 3 riders were approaching the ranch. Clara came beside him. "Who are they?" Elias watched the riders carefully. "The sheriff." "Is that bad?" "For most people, no." He lowered his voice. "For us, yes." The sheriff dismounted. 2 deputies followed. Elias opened the front door. "Sheriff." Sheriff Colton tipped his hat. Evening, Elias. His eyes moved past him, then stopped on Clara. Mrs. Whitmore. Clara stiffened. You know me? The sheriff smiled. I know your husband. Where is he? The smile disappeared. Dead. Clara's face went white. Elias stepped forward. When? 3 days ago. Where? About 30 miles south. Why wasn't I told? Colton looked at him. Because nobody knew he was coming here. Elias felt the letter in his coat. That was a lie. The sheriff knew. And suddenly Elias understood something else. The sheriff hadn't come to tell Clara her husband was dead. He had come to see whether she had reached the ranch. Do you have identification? Colton asked her. Clara reached into her coat. Elias stopped her. No. The sheriff frowned. Excuse me? My guest has already been identified. By whom? Me. The sheriff's hand moved near his belt. You making trouble, Boone? Elias held his gaze. Not yet. The sheriff smiled. Then don't start. The riders left. Clara waited until they disappeared. That man knows where my husband is. Yes. You believe me? I believe he lied. Elias walked to the fireplace. He removed Samuel's letter from his coat. Clara read it again. Then she looked up. There is something else. What? My husband told me to bring something. She opened the lining of her suitcase. A small brass key fell into her palm. Elias stared at it. What does it open? I don't know. Then Clara noticed something behind the portrait at a narrow keyhole. Had been hidden beneath the wooden frame. She looked at Elias. He slowly lifted the portrait from the wall. Behind it was a locked compartment. The brass key fit. Inside was a ledger, and beneath the ledger was a second letter. This one was addressed to Samuel. Elias opened it, his brother's. Handwriting appeared again. Samuel, if they discover the ledger, they will come for everyone connected to it. Your wife must never know the truth until she reaches Elias. He is the only one I trust. Elias stared at the words. Clara whispered, Your brother knew my husband. He did. And he knew me. Apparently. She took a breath. Then why did he say you were the only man he trusted? Elias looked toward the dark window, because outside, a lantern had appeared at the far edge of the ranch. Someone was standing there, watching the house. Elias grabbed his rifle. Stay inside. Clara caught his sleeve. No. He looked at her. I'm not hiding while men outside decide what happens to me for several seconds. They stared at each other. Then Elias handed her a revolver. Can you use it? Yes. Where did you learn? My husband taught me. Elias nodded. Then stay close. They stepped into the darkness together, and neither of them noticed the second rider. Approaching from behind the barn, he carried a rifle, and on his saddle was the dead man's coat.